Well, hey gang, Nuclear Pastor here with a video version of my latest article called Faith, COVID-19 Orthodoxy, Snowflakes, and the Resident Skeptic. The full article can be found posted on my blog at nuclearpastor.com. Well, boy, there's no denying that we are in unprecedented times. Nothing I've ever seen in my 58 years of life, and yes, I'm no Methuselah, but boy, nothing I've ever seen matches the effect that COVID-19 has already had and is still having on our planet. And likewise, nothing matches Christianity's incredible response to it. And it's that response that brings us together today. So here we are as I record this in mid-May. We're about 10 weeks into the original shutdown, which means that here in Texas, we're in beginning week 3 of our reopening and our re-entry, which is going really well. Now, the first thing to understand about COVID-19 is that it's a human issue. It's a planetary issue, an issue for all earthlings. And Christians and churches have therefore done their part in what can only be classified as a major war effort. And as we've done so, it's been done so in a fairly uniform way, and that's given rise to what I call the COVID-19 orthodoxy, which roughly looks like this. Christians are abiding by federal, state, and local requests not to congregate. Now, in some cases, those have unfortunately been orders and not requests. Churches have voluntarily suspended in-person services and have moved everything online. Churches have severely curtailed or in some cases completely stopped visitations by pastors, elders, and deacons. Physical person-to-person ministry has essentially ceased. Christians are voluntarily or mandatorily in some cases sheltering in their homes with very little person-to-person contact outside of their immediate family, and they're keeping in touch largely through electronic means. We're checking in on neighbors and friends more often than was normal before COVID-19, and we're always looking for ways to help those most affected by COVID-19, and all of that is great stuff. Wonderful stuff to be expected and certainly to be applauded in followers of Jesus Christ, and is in keeping with scriptural guidance to be good citizens, to work with our civil authorities when and where possible and appropriate, and to care for one another and be good Samaritans. However, having said all of that, it doesn't mean that questions shouldn't be asked, because we know that all actions have consequences, and we may not like the consequences that are likely to follow. So let me introduce you to the idea of the resident skeptic. Before pastoring, I spent 16 years as a nuclear power plant operator, someone known in the business as a nuke. My first 6 years as a nuke were in the U.S. Navy, and my final 10 years were at the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, a commercial power plant known by the acronym SONGS. And at SONGS, they did an enlightened thing, in that during periods of high activity, high stress, high change, such as a refueling outage, they would station an individual with a senior reactor operator's license in the control room, and they gave them a peculiar job. Well, what was their job? Their job, believe it or not, was to get in the way, to ask bothersome questions. And so they were lovingly known as the resident skeptic, and they questioned everything. They were designed to be the lone voice going the other way in order to keep us from succumbing to the herd mentality or succumbing to intense schedule pressure, and of course gave us an extra layer of safety, always something welcome in the nuclear industry. Now, it's important to understand when we talk about the resident skeptic and their job is that they didn't need to necessarily believe in his or her position or his or her question. What they did need to do was play the devil's advocate and ask the what-if questions for the sake of asking the what-if questions. And everyone understood what value they brought to us, and so no one took things personally, and everyone could go out for pizza or breakfast after the long shift was over. And so I hope that as I play the resident skeptic here today, that no one takes what I'm doing here personally. It's not meant that way. But I did always think that the resident skeptic was a wonderful and a brilliant idea among many in that realm. And I'm forever indebted to that industry for instilling two things in me. The first is the desire to fully understand what's going on around me. And the second is that of a skeptical, questioning mind that automatically looks the other direction when everyone else is traveling down the same path. And so after my time at Songs, I spent 18 years in full-time ministry, the last 7 of those as a senior pastor. after which I had to step away due to some health issues, which are thankfully gone now. And I've had the privilege of resting in the pews for the past 2 years and now find myself on the sidelines during COVID-19, unencumbered by the helm of church leadership and not needing to act in any executive capacity, but instead rather playing the part of the resident skeptic during COVID-19. Now, as I do, understand that I don't necessarily believe the points I'm making, or at least all the points that I'm making, or insist that they're right. But if a question stings, it might be a good idea to take a look at that question and why it stings. And if a question makes you want to go out and hurt little puppies, maybe a major calibration might be in order. You want to take a real hard look at that question. So, hey, some apply to me and my family and some don't, and some may apply to you and your family and some may not. And certainly none of this is an indictment of anyone's actions, nor a dissatisfaction with my own church, whose actions have been pitch perfect during this whole thing. But I do see a herd mentality in operation, and I'm duty bound, both as a nuke and as a pastor, to question that mentality. Now, the herd may be doing exactly the right thing in exactly the right way, and that would be awesome. But to establish that, we need to question it first. That brings up the question, hey, why am I so skeptical in the first place? Am I just a stick in the mud? Now, that's always a possibility. I think some stick in the mudism runs in my DNA. But however, to me, it's due to the era in which we find ourselves living. That's my skepticism, because we're living in what I call the snowflake age. Now, snowflakes are people famously characterized by fleeing to their safe space whenever they encounter opposition. And there's no denying that as we look around, we've all made a tactical retreat to our COVID-19 safe spaces, fearful of a virus that we were told would kill untold millions if we didn't all do our parts to flatten the curve. And so now we've all become cave dwellers who are systematically destroying a phenomenal economy, an incredible civilization, and quite possibly the idea of a physically congregating church, all over fear of a virus that can have the tar demonstrably kicked out of it by a decades-old malaria medicine and a Z-Pack. It's important to understand that this won't be the last scary virus to come down the pike. Will we shut down the world for 3 months every COVID and flu season? And if that's the new snowflake reality, we can pretty much kiss civilization goodbye and pretty much kiss public congregational worship as we know it goodbye. Hey, there's a serious possibility that we're letting the snowflakes destroy an essential tenet to our faith. And what is that tenet? That of gathering together for corporate worship. And it certainly is hard to deny that we've walked away from physical corporate worship for 10 plus weeks now. So, time to don the resident skeptic hat. These first set of questions assume that the COVID-19 orthodoxy is pretty solid and that we're essentially and outwardly doing the right things. First question, are we forgetting that gathering together is core to our faith? So from the day of Pentecost until about 10 weeks ago, Christianity and Christians were defined by the fact that we gathered together. At least that was a big part of what defined us. Now we've reacted to and are reacting to some dire circumstances by moving ministry online as we should. But at the same time, I hear some extolling the amazing virtues of the online church experience as though it is and should be the next great movement of the church. Now it's good for the shut-in or the isolated and great for the seeker and wonderful even for the far-flung missionary. But for most of us, it should be regarded as nothing more than lipstick on the pig of quarantine, and we should hunger to return to physical gatherings. Next question. Have we pushed the ministry of presence too far aside? Partly because I'm a natural introvert, it was drummed into me by the men who trained me as a pastor, and I believe by the Holy Spirit himself as well, that pastoral ministry is the ministry of presence. Ministry is presence, and presence is ministry. Now, televisits and virtual visits, they work well for medicine and some other areas, but I submit that they're fairly unnatural for Christianity. Christ, who is God and omnipotent, could have had a virtual ministry to our diseased and contaminated world, but instead, he came to be a physical presence in people's lives. And so it's grievous to hear that some pastors, elders, and deacons have just carte blanche ceased visitation for the duration of COVID-19. And I must wonder, where then is the laying on of hands and the anointing with oil? Where is the greatly needed hug? Where is that physical presence during a crisis, especially a health crisis, which have historically brought out the best in Christians and Christianity? Next question. Are we truly protecting the most vulnerable from COVID-19 or just ourselves? And this really is a question of the heart. Now, it's easy to speak of or hide behind high-sounding ideas like civil obedience and concern for the most vulnerable among us. But are we really just masking that we're hiding in fear like everyone else? And hey, it's okay if we are. Let's just admit it and stop hiding behind spiritual catchphrases and get on with it. Next question. How much hope in God are we giving to the world? We speak and we sing of how caring and how great and mighty and loving and protecting our God is, all while holed up in isolation over fear of contamination from a virus. This is pure satire. This is pure Babylon Bee, if you stop to think about it. Hey, I'm not saying that we should all just charge out of our homes to make a point about our faith, but it does go back to the ministry of presence. And I believe it goes back even further than that. It goes back to our heroes in the faith and why they are our heroes in the faith. We think of David, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel, all men who went out and met the fearful thing of their day. But yet we can't go out and physically visit the ill and sick and needy in Jesus' name because of a virus, and especially a virus with a proven Achilles heel. Next question. Are we missing a chance to be lighthouses in the world's greatest hour of need? Hey, of course, God will use what we offer him. He always has, and he is doing so today. But at the same time, I think it's somewhat of a shame that during a time of such deep hysteria, deep panic and despair, that the lost of this world could not physically visit our places of corporate worship and find hope there in hearing beautiful, unashamed, unafraid praise and worship coming from within. Next question, and this is my favorite, and I'm trying not to laugh as I bring this one up. Is the church really deployed? We've all seen the meme or heard the phrase, hey, the church isn't empty, it's just deployed. Well, as a former military man, I find that kind of nonsensical, because to be deployed means to be sent out and to be on patrol, and that's just not the case with everyone on house arrest, especially when it's voluntary house arrest. Finally, for this set of questions, are we confusing making quarantine lemonade with ministry we should have been doing all along? Hey, the church is just being differently deployed, and as proof, we're told, look, families are spending more time together. Look, we're getting to know our neighbors. Look, we're finding unique ways to bless hard-to-reach people. Look, we're showing support for heroic people and their heroic deeds. And all of that is wonderful and deserves applause, but maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder that we should have been doing these things all along. Now, time for the resident skeptic to switch gears and talk about the emperor with no clothes. What is that? That all of this was likely a huge overreaction with very serious and long-lasting consequences. First question here. How much do we trust the experts? From the beginning, information about COVID-19 has been all over the map. Many experts have been proven inexpert, inept, and frankly to be agenda-driven. And fully trusting them, their models and predictions has led to total societal shutdown, loss of virtually all freedoms, and rising totalitarianism. All of this in order to avert this certain and horrible juggernaut of planetary cataclysm known as coronavirus. Now, I'll be kind to the experts. I'll assume that they didn't want to be the first to undershoot the numbers, but then when everything went awry and they proved completely out of the ballpark on everything, they then outdid themselves in demanding draconian control of society in order to save us all from something they were clueless about in the first place. Now, I love science. I spent 16 years in the field of applied science and physics and enjoyed every one of them. But I do not trust most so-called scientific modeling. And why is that? Because I've lived long enough to see that science is not politically neutral. It should be, but it isn't. Just look at climate change modeling as proof. Therefore, I don't inherently trust scientists any more than I inherently trust politicians, since too many of them have an agenda or work for someone who does. Instead, I make them earn my trust and loyalty on a case-by-case basis. Regarding the civil authorities under whom we serve or under whom we live, remember that even the best of them, and there are good ones, there are even great ones out there, they do not have in mind the things of a church, nor should they. But we as Christians, and especially we as Christian leaders, do have those things in mind, and we should always look to those things apart from our civil leaders. That's our duty. Next question, have we allowed hysteria to rule the day? Now, there's no denying that COVID-19 is serious. It's scary. People have died from it, and people are dying from it. But there's also no denying that there's been a phenomenal degree of hysteria driving reaction to it on all fronts. And this despite the fact that the answer to it is already in our hands in hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. Why? Why this hysteria? Well, there are two reasons, I think. The first reason's pretty simple. The snowflakes are everywhere nowadays. They're in politics, they're in the media, they're in academia, they're in science, medicine, even in the church. And they are henny penny, woe is me, sky is falling, run for your safe space kind of people. That's how they deal with problems. They don't dig in, they don't face it, they don't stiffen their spine and attack or even defend. They run screaming to their safe spaces. The second reason is a little more serious. The freedom haters among us. There are those who love to generate and use crises in order to gain, exert, and maintain control over the lives of others. Freedom has many enemies, and those enemies love to use hysteria and to use those who are hysterical to accomplish their agenda. Next question, and this is a pretty serious one here, I think. Are we really saving lives? Here's the argument. Because we love God, we love life and are pro-life people. Therefore, shutting down everything to flatten the curve and save lives is a no-brainer for us, right? And so we dutifully shut down our society and destroy our economy in order to save those lives. But remember, we're only saving potential lives based on models and predictions, and that only by keeping the healthcare system from being overwhelmed in the beginning, and that's already been accomplished. Yet, there are other ways to calculate those potential lives saved. What about lives lost to poverty, destitution, despair, and suicide from the economic carnage? What about lives lost due to other normal medical treatments being put on hold? What about lives lost because other medical issues aren't being diagnosed? Are we potentially losing more lives than we're potentially saving? Next question. Should we so easily give up our freedoms? The Bill of Rights, that beautiful Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution, enshrines our right as Americans and as Christians to assemble, to freely speak our minds, and to define and practice our faith as we see fit, period. It's inalienable. By extension, this means that our ceasing of corporate physical gatherings for worship is done on a largely voluntary basis. There's some wiggle room here, but actually very little, in fact, in truth. We must ask, therefore, have we set a dangerous precedent by too easily and quickly giving these rights up in the face of the COVID-19 threat? We do well as followers of Christ to remember that government exists in order to limit human freedoms. That comes from Genesis 9:6. And government is therefore a necessary evil best kept in a small cage. Rare indeed is the government that willingly and fully returns to its people a freedom that they have willingly relinquished. And just look at the totalitarian tendencies this quarantine has unleashed throughout our country. Will these totalitarians recede quietly into that dark night as COVID-19 retreats? We shall see. Also, now everyone knows that the simple hysteria around a new virus will get churches to close their doors and send worshipers running for the hills in their safe spaces. Now, I must assume that the enemies of our faith are taking notes on this, and I'm pretty sure that our ancient enemy is. Hey, one good pandemic every couple of years, and it's adios to many a fine church and the very idea of physical congregational worship. The snowflakes are standing by and awaiting their orders. Now, some pastors and leaders may say, it's not my fight, brother. I don't do politics. Now, I have to respectfully challenge that at a very fundamental level. I could challenge it on many levels, but I'll just do so on a fundamental level right here. And it is this, that this world, our entire world, is a far better place because of our First Amendment rights in America, because of the power of the First Amendment, because of the wisdom of the First Amendment. These rights contained within the First Amendment have brought so much light to our dark world from pole to pole and from east to west. We do poorly to give up on it. We do poorly even to coast in neutral regarding those rights. And last question, how many churches are we destroying in the process? This lengthy quarantine is going to destroy many wonderful churches and their hardworking pastors. Out of fear, many congregants won't return for a long time, if ever, and the financial blow of having the doors closed for weeks or months on end is going to hurt many churches surviving on the financial fringe. And with the fallout of the coming economic crunch added to the issue of tithes and offerings, it's not hard to see what's coming down the pike. We should expect to see many churches in dire straits or closing their doors. So those are the tough questions from this resident skeptic. I hope that there hasn't been too much sting for you in any of the questions. And I certainly hope that none of the questions make you want to go out and hurt the poor little puppies. Please don't hurt the puppies. We love the puppies. Now, overall, the church in America, in my view, has done an amazing job during a most difficult, unprecedented, and unforeseen time, and especially in one that came on us so hard and so fast out of nowhere. And other than trusting those who are untrustworthy, the greatest weakness I see is that churches are so used to operating individually, which is great from a pastoral standpoint, but we're so used to operating individually that we don't have time to act in concert for something like this when it comes along, and especially when it comes along so quickly. So I think it would be nice if we could work out some kind of standard that must be met by our civil authorities in the future before the wholesale closure of places of worship occurs voluntarily. Remember that good government is one that fears the governed, and we who are part of the governed need to be part of that fear factor. Our civil authorities always need to be mindful that we exist and that we understand our First Amendment rights. Now, the Trump administration is largely and wonderfully benevolent toward faith in this regard, but it would still be better if we were better at speaking with one voice because, hey, you never know about the next administration. Now, having played the resident skeptic, it's now time to share my hopes, and I do have hopes here. As an American, I expect to see our freedoms returned fully and soon, and there will be pockets of resistance to this, of course. And I hope that we've learned that we cannot trust communist China at all and must break our dependence upon that nation. As an earthling, I hope that COVID-19 has put a wooden stake through the heart of that hideous vampire known as globalism, although I doubt it. I don't think anything works on that vampire so well. And as a Christian, I'm excited to see churches broaden the spectrum of ministry to include the internet for those unable to attend. I'm excited to see families acting like families again, including my own. I'm excited to see us returning to those simple, beautiful things we should have been doing all along. I'm excited to see more worship in the home, including my own. And I'm super excited to physically rejoin my dear brothers and sisters in corporate worship of our truly awesome God. And that's already begun happening here in Texas, thankfully. And I know that next time, I look forward to learning, all of us learning the good lessons and the bad lessons from the COVID-19 experience. And I know that next time we'll all be much better prepared to his praise and glory. And so the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. And so thank you for your time. And until next time, may God richly bless you in and through the person of his one and only Son, Jesus Christ the righteous. Thanks so much.